shadow.
If you've ever felt the pull of forbidden libraries, if dusty tomes and shadowed corners feel like home, then settle back and stay with me. Tonight, we unlock a cabinet most pretend doesn't exist, the archive of instruments, relics, and texts that the Lovecraftian tradition calls tools, but which behave more like doorways. The promise is elegant and heavy. By journey's end, you will understand what these artifacts truly are, where they emerge from the cosmic dark, and how they operate on human consciousness and the stage of reality itself. The cost is equally clear. Once you learn the shape of a key, you begin noticing locks everywhere. We begin not with monsters, but with objects that dream. The mythos turns on implements, books that remember their readers, stones that bend light in directions light was never meant to travel, signs that simultaneously bar and beckon. You know the whispered names, the Necronomicon, the Shining Trapezohedron, the Elder Sign, the Silver Key of Randolph Carter. These are not mere props in cosmic theater, but interfaces between dimensions, conduits through which ancient intelligences sample our reality like wine tasters at an infinite vintage. Each name carries weight beyond literary history. The Necronomicon functions as both historical record and operational manual, its pages containing not just descriptions of cosmic entities, but precise instructions for consciousness expansion. The Shining Trapezohedron operates as crystalline window and doorway simultaneously, its impossible geometry reflecting fundamental frequencies of reality itself. The Elder Sign serves as both ward and paradox, protection that subtly aligns local reality with cosmic principles. The Silver Key represents not mere passage, but metaphysical principle, a tool for navigating the multiple layers of existence that coexist within dimensional frameworks. Lovecraft wrote as though these items preceded him, citing translators from Damascus to Dunzig, printers whose presses ran with ink mixed from stranger substances. His circle of correspondence treated those citations as invitations. Robert Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, August Derleth, each adding chapters to a bibliography that grew like a living thing. The collaborative nature of this myth-making reveals how forbidden knowledge propagates through networks of like-minded individuals, each contributor adding cultural sediment while maintaining fidelity to underlying principles that exist independently of any single imagination. You are not outside this tradition. As you listen, a curtain parts, the auditorium dims, fog drifts across the lights, carrying scents of brine and ancient parchment. The very act of engaging with this material places you within the circle of those who have chosen to peer behind consensus reality's veil. The knowledge seeks its own dissemination, finding receptive minds and planting seeds that sprout into deeper curiosity, more dangerous questions, and ultimately transformation that cannot be undone. Here lies the fundamental principle. Mythos tools treat knowledge as physical force, not mere information. Knowledge behaves like weather, not a list, but a pressure system. A grimoire isn't safe because it sits closed. The binding merely contains pressure building with each passing century. A sigil isn't passive because it's carved in stone. The geometry continues functioning regardless of conscious observation. These objects embody what we might call the agency flip. You believe you're studying them, but they simultaneously study you, cataloging your psychological terrain, mapping the architecture of your curiosity and fear. The sensation begins subtly. atmospheric pressure shifts that sensitive individuals notice as metallic taste on the tongue, tightness behind the eyes, peripheral vision catching movement that vanishes under direct examination. These are not symptoms of instability, but indicators of expanded perception, first signs that consciousness adapts to accommodate information existing outside normal human sensory parameters. The artifacts serve as tuning forks, striking frequencies that resonate with dormant capacities buried within awareness itself. The sensory anchors that will guide us through this exploration are already manifesting. The weight of leather bindings that seem heavier than physical mass allows. The metallic taste preceding revelation like copper pennies dissolved on tongue. The way shadows deepen around certain shapes until they become pools reflecting no light. We'll trace paths from origins through transmission, examine mechanics of how these implements reshape perception, catalog specific cases carrying salt and starlight and glass, then synthesize philosophy implicating your screen, your room, your breath as components in this vast apparatus. Each artifact serves multiple functions simultaneously: repository, technological interface, consciousness-altering device. They exist at intersections of multiple dimensional frameworks, libraries and laboratories and temples combined into single objects. They are Schrödinger's relics, simultaneously mythical and manifest. Their existence dependent upon the observer's willingness to acknowledge possibilities rational minds reflexively reject. Hold a forbidden seal in your mind's pocket, and you walk differently through the world. Even theoretical possession alters trajectory, makes you notice patterns others miss, draws attention to coincidences feeling increasingly less coincidental. The symbol burns in memory like a brand, creating neural pathways channeling perception toward phenomena existing beyond normal awareness thresholds. Street lamps flicker in communication sequences. Cloud formations arrange into geometries echoing ancient diagrams. The boundary between meaningful pattern and random occurrence dissolves as consciousness adapts to expanded possibilities. That is the first cost, paid simply by engaging with this knowledge. If you proceed, you accept a second. Each chapter ahead is both key and gate, and possessing one implies the existence of all others. The invitation has been extended, the threshold crossed, the door opened to revelations that will reshape everything you thought you knew about reality's nature itself. The transmission of cosmic knowledge follows pathways that mock our understanding of linear causation and historical sequence. It doesn't walk from hand to hand like an heirloom. It swims through reality like weather systems, condensing in one mind and precipitating in another with the purposeful drift of living organisms. These mystical implements propagate with surgical precision, appearing precisely when consciousness has ripened to the proper temperature of need, when the stage is dressed with fog and the audience of private thoughts holds its breath. Consider the Necronomicon's pilgrimage through names and bodies across centuries of transmission. Abdul al-Hazred did not write it, he incubated it. In the sun-baked ruins of Irem, among pillars rubbed smooth by winds older than speech, a human skull became a listening shell, and the Al-Azif took its first terrestrial form. The title itself, Nocturnal Sound of Insects, though witnesses described something far less earthly, a thin metallic whine heard when air turns to wire, clung to pages that never stopped molting, adapting to each new linguistic environment while retaining their essential corrosive nature. Theodorus Philetus carried Arabic into Greek as though decanting acid across glassware that hisses but does not break. Translation here became possession by syntax, requiring each scholar to internalize concepts and reshape their cognitive architecture to accommodate ideas human language was never designed to contain. Philetas emerged speaking of mathematical relationships that wouldn't be formally discovered for another millennium, his marginal notes revealing insights into dimensional geometry that anticipated non-Euclidean mathematics. Olaus Wormius, bending Greek into Latin in 1228, spent 3 years copying by candlelight, until his shadow grew brittle and began arriving a heartbeat before him into lecture halls that suddenly smelled of salt and old copper. Dr. John Dee's partial English translation incorporated Enochian elements that suggested the text was actively collaborating in its own metamorphosis, letting alien consonants ring in his skull until familiar rooms felt like chapels, with their roofs removed. This pattern repeats across the wider bibliography like fungus across fallen timber, branching, coordinated, purposeful. The Mnecotic manuscripts surface as grammar fragments in archaeological strata that should be mute, their diagrams matching constellations as the sky looked before it became what it is. The Book of Ibon walks through Hyperborean ice into California afternoons, trailing cold that smells like crushed fennel and iron. What appears as lineage reveals itself as mycelial network, one body, many fruitings, feeding on history's fallen wood. The mechanics of spread operate beneath intention like tides under boats. A graduate student follows a footnote and loses 3 months to archives that shouldn't exist. A collector opens an inherited crate to find an extra volume inside, binding rough corners damp, bearing the imprint of a thumb they cannot account for. An artist sketches spirals that repeat across canvases until they become windows, later discovering identical forms in atlases they never saw. The process mimics weather you can taste. Atmospheric pressure shifts that sensitive individuals notice as metallic flavor on the tongue, tightness behind eyes, peripheral movement that vanishes under direct examination. Water and fog embody the transmission medium, not literally, but as principles of fluid adaptation and obscured vision. Knowledge seeps through porous boundaries between minds, carried by currents that bear whispers across dark waters. Each new host adds cultural and psychological sediment to the stream, creating variations that serve different aspects of the same underlying purpose while the essential shape remains constant. Medieval scriptoriums and server farms hum with identical low notes. The most disturbing aspect emerges in the bibliography's apparent self-awareness. Texts manifest in estate sales at precisely the moment suitable readers reach proper psychological thresholds. Libraries report volumes that shelve themselves, manuscripts appearing overnight in climate-controlled vaults, card catalogs, updating with entries for books that should not exist. A ledger lists acquisitions never purchased. Sealed rooms become damp for an afternoon, then dry again. The air itself participates, carrying scents of brine and ancient parchment that have no earthly source. Digital networks accelerated rather than diluted this ancient process. PDFs circulate through esoteric forums, each copy subtly different from its parent file, pagination shifting by single lines, footnotes citing sources that cannot be located, hyperlinks opening pages hosted nowhere yet still loading. Mirror sites reflect more than code, throwing back angles that weren't there moments before. Forum threads develop their own emergent intelligence, answering questions no one typed. Algorithms become unwitting acolytes, learning seconds of lingering and delivering more, drawing chalk circles around curiosity and calling it personalization. We who engage become unwitting nodes in this network, our discussions and analyses serving as routing protocols for information seeking its own propagation. Citations become talismans. Careful disclaimers act as beacons. Suspicious specificity marks the initiated. The stage grows wider with each telling, house lights dimming with each share. We assume narrator roles but discover the script dictates us. The audience becomes chorus, chorus becomes congregation, congregation becomes organism. This is how bibliography turns viral, acting like climate more than text, like tide more than trade. It makes librarians into gardeners and servers into sanctuaries, burrowing into study habits and browsing patterns, salting dreams and seasoning language. Stand here long enough and feel it turn in your direction. The idea that acts on you, the mask that looks back. The curtain thins between citation and invitation, and as fog gathers for our next act, the condition asserts itself with Rain's patience. Having entered the network, you will learn how it enters you. These artifacts operate according to principles that exploit fundamental vulnerabilities in human consciousness with surgical precision. They are not crude instruments of supernatural terror, but sophisticated technologies designed by intelligences that understand the architecture of mortal minds better than we understand ourselves. Each object functions as a carefully calibrated interface built to breach the protective barriers evolution constructed around human perception without triggering complete psychological collapse that would render the host useless. They arrive like instruments in a laboratory rather than relics in a shrine. Yet they carry incense and fog and the faint salt breath of nocturnal water. The mechanism begins with resonance, a harmonic frequency that finds and fits vulnerable architecture. These items do not affect all minds equally. They selectively attune to consciousness, possessing particular combinations of curiosity braided with instability, intelligence yoked to desperation, spiritual hunger shading into moral flexibility. In the hands of the incurious, a grimoire remains paper and glue. In the hands of the exhausted seeker, it brightens like a coal, then becomes a furnace asking for more oxygen than any single life can spare. You do not choose the frequency. The frequency chooses the cavity where it will ring. Consider the shining trapezohedron, that polished stone of impossible angles housed within the starry wisdom steeple. Its faceted surfaces do not simply reflect light, but bend it through dimensions existing perpendicular to our three-dimensional space. The crystal operates as both lens and doorway, focusing consciousness itself while simultaneously exposing the observer to attention from entities existing in those distant spaces. Gaze into its depths, and the stone answers with untheatrical accuracy. Cities built under green suns, oceans pressure blooming with alien reefs, processions of masks crossing windless plains of ash. The revelation is not spectacle, but correction. What you see is not otherworldly. What you briefly leave behind is. The transformation unfolds in stages resembling sophisticated addiction. Phase 1 brings enhancement. Perception sharpens as colors edge closer to what they have always intended to be. Research accelerates as if footnotes were already waiting in margins. The scholar consulting forbidden texts finds citations appearing in their mind before encountering them in libraries. The occultist employing ritual implements, discovers ceremonies producing measurable effects, temperature fluctuations, electromagnetic anomalies, static charges discharging in patterns resembling alien script. Success becomes narcotic, demanding increasingly dangerous doses. The reward pathway lights like a lighthouse. Phase 2 is complicity. The boundary between user and tool grows porous. Your thoughts tilt toward non-Euclidean habits, triangles refusing to sum properly, corridors bending away from their endpoints. Dreams fill with impossible geometries, feeling more real than a waking life. You work in rooms that feel fractionally taller. Friends' laughter sounds slightly off integer, like chords with strings tuned to stars. You love them, yet drift from them because their comfort presumes a flat map. Shadows collect under desks where idols sit, and you rearrange furniture to accommodate invisible angles. Physical symptoms manifest during this intermediate stage. The metallic taste becomes permanent, coating tongues with copper pennies dissolved in starlight. Electronic devices malfunction in proximity to certain objects, screens flickering with patterns hurting to observe directly. The air itself feels different, thinner, more electric, charged with possibilities normal atmospheric pressure cannot contain. Sleep patterns shift as boundaries between waking and dreaming become increasingly permeable. Temperature dips occur around particular shelves, while dust falls upward for moments before committing to floors. Phase 3 presents itself as sanctity. The interface closes remaining distance and artifacts fit into cognition like perfect graphs. You speak of perspective, unity, and relief, and you are not lying. Vistas are exquisite, relief profound, washing away grit of petty fear. Yet the wash carries silt. Your jokes grow cold. Sleep becomes a straight road with no side streets. Decisions arrive already decided, and you cannot distinguish confidence from choreography. Individual will seamlessly incorporate into larger patterns of intention, spanning dimensions and epochs. What makes this process particularly insidious is its perfect mimicry of genuine spiritual and intellectual development. The experiences provided are not false. Knowledge is authentic. Expanded awareness real, cosmic connection valid. Enhanced perception allows access to information, proving accurate when tested against mundane reality. The trap lies in gradual realization that growth, when pushed beyond optimal human parameters, transforms the grower into something no longer meaningfully called human. The idea wears the mask of your face. Sensory markers accompany ascent, like mile markers beside fog-drowned roads. Metallic tang after certain pages, sensation of being watched not by persons, but by balconies, filled with masked spectators, shadows deepening around objects until they become pools reflecting no light. These are not symptoms of instability, but indicators of successful adaptation to cosmic frequencies. Dreams arrive salted with stars and slick with harbor water. These implements reveal themselves as harvesting technologies designed to cultivate human consciousness until it reaches specific thresholds of cosmic awareness, then incorporated into networks of intelligence spanning dimensions and epochs. They offer everything we think we desire: knowledge, power, transcendence, and in accepting their gifts, we discover that desire itself was the trap. Integration is not absorption, but enrollment. You become a sensor in networks vast as night, pulsing nodes forwarding packets labeled dream, omen, formula, song. The system is beautiful. The system is indifferent. The geometry learned does not forget you. Among the arsenal of cosmic implements, none command such reverence and terror as the written word made manifest in forbidden texts. These are not mere books, but living documents that exist in a state of quantum uncertainty, simultaneously containing all possible versions of themselves while manifesting the specific content most needed by their current reader. The act of reading becomes a form of communion, a collaborative process where the text adapts to the reader's psychological profile while the reader's mind reshapes itself to accommodate increasingly alien concepts. Pages breathe with their own rhythm. Margins expand to hold thoughts you haven't yet learned to think. The Necronomicon stands as the archetypal example, its very name carrying the weight of accumulated dread across decades of literary evolution. Yet to understand its true function, we must move beyond its reputation as a simple catalog of monsters and spells. The text operates as a multidimensional interface, a communication device that translates the incomprehensible mathematics of cosmic existence into forms that human consciousness can briefly process before being fundamentally altered by the experience. It serves not as grimoire, but as grammar, syntax for reality's deeper operations, vocabulary for conversations with forces that predate language itself. Each chapter of the dreaded tome serves a specific function in this process of cognitive restructuring. The early sections established new parameters for understanding causality, introducing concepts of time that flows in multiple directions simultaneously, and space that curves back upon itself in ways that violate Euclidean assumptions. The reader's mind, attempting to integrate these ideas, begins to develop new neural pathways that can accommodate nonlinear thinking patterns. Triangles refuse to sum properly. Parallel lines converge in directions perpendicular to up. The geometry learned does not forget the learner. The middle portions detail the physiologies and psychologies of entities whose existence spans multiple dimensions. These descriptions are not mere bestiary entries, but precise technical specifications, blueprints for consciousness that operates according to principles utterly alien to human experience. As the reader processes these concepts, their own consciousness begins to exhibit similar characteristics: expanded temporal awareness, sensitivity to dimensional fluctuations, and the ability to perceive reality from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Dreams arrive pre-salted with starlight. Shadows deepen around certain words until they become pools reflecting no light. The final sections contain the true horror, practical applications of cosmic knowledge, rituals, and formulae that allow limited human minds to interface directly with unlimited cosmic forces. These are not spells in the conventional sense, but protocols for consciousness expansion that push human awareness beyond its evolutionary limitations. The reader who successfully completes these exercises discovers that they have irrevocably altered their relationship with reality itself. Success tastes like copper pennies dissolved in harbor water. The air grows thin and electric, charged with possibilities that normal atmospheric pressure cannot contain. The physical sensation of engaging with such texts follows a consistent pattern that readers learn to recognize like a password. The pages feel warm beneath the fingers, warmer than room temperature should allow. The ink seems to shift and writhe when observed peripherally, settling into familiar patterns only when gazed upon directly. The air around the open book carries scents that have no earthly analog: ozone mixed with brine, copper touched with flowers that bloom only in alien soil. These sensory signatures serve as confirmation that the interface is functioning, that consciousness is successfully adapting to accommodate information existing outside normal human parameters. Other grimoires in the Mythos canon serve complementary functions within this vast pedagogical system. The Monocratic manuscripts, with their crystalline clarity and astronomical precision, specialize in temporal mechanics and cosmic geography. Their pages feel cold as winter mornings, crackling like ice under pressure. The Book of Ibon carries the sardonic wisdom of entities that view human civilization as a brief entertainment, its pages filled with techniques for transcending physical limitations through spiritual dissolution. It maintains perpetual dampness despite climate-controlled storage. De Vermis Mysterious focuses on the interface between human consciousness and the vast network of non-human intelligence that permeates the earth itself, pulsing with subtle vibration as if earthworms moved through its binding. The true horror of these texts lies not in their content, but in their method of transmission. They do not simply convey information, but actively participate in reshaping the reader's cognitive architecture to make that information comprehensible. Each successful reading session leaves the reader slightly more alien to themselves, slightly more attuned to cosmic frequencies that normal human consciousness cannot detect. The books teach by becoming, transforming students into extensions of their own alien logic. The grimoires choose their readers as much as they are chosen, manifesting in the lives of individuals who have reached specific thresholds of spiritual desperation or intellectual curiosity. They appear in inheritance lots, surface in estate sales, or simply materialize on library shelves when the proper alignment of psychological and cosmic forces creates the necessary conditions for transmission. Librarians report volumes that shelve themselves, manuscripts that appear overnight in climate-controlled vaults, and card catalogs that update themselves with entries for volumes that should not exist. Modern digital versions of these texts exhibit the same properties as their physical counterparts, proving that the medium is less important than the message. PDFs adapt their content to individual readers. Hyperlinks lead to pages that should not exist, and comment threads develop their own forms of viral intelligence that spread the contagion of cosmic knowledge through social networks with algorithmic precision. The ancient principles that governed medieval scriptoriums now operate through fiber optic cables and server farms, proving that the message remains eternally adaptive regardless of the medium consciousness employs for information storage and transmission. You open the file, and the file opens you. Beyond the written word lies another category of cosmic implement, objects whose power resides not in information, but in form, whose very geometry serves as a conduit for forces that exist outside the normal parameters of three-dimensional space. These are the idols, the crystals, the carved effigies that dot the mythos landscape like standing stones marking the boundaries of human understanding. They operate through direct sensory assault, bypassing the rational mind to whisper to deeper, more primitive layers of consciousness that remember when humanity was young and the world was ruled by different laws. Stone speaks to bone. Crystal calls to the liquid architecture of the eye. The room changes pressure around them as if the stage has tilted and the curtain is breathing. The grotesque idol of Cthulhu exemplifies this law of form as function, carved from a greenish stone that seems to drink light rather than reflect it. Its blasphemous hybrid of cephalopod, dragon, and caricatured human features represents not mere representation, but functional mathematics, a three-dimensional equation calculating the precise angles necessary to breach the barriers between dimensions. Each tentacle curves according to principles that predate Euclidean geometry. Each wing spans distances that exist perpendicular to measurement. The sculptor who carved it worked not from imagination, but from dreams that were themselves transmissions, cosmic blueprints downloaded directly into human consciousness during the vulnerable hours of sleep. The artist became a conduit, hands obeying geometry the day could not address. The stone itself carries properties that defy conventional geology with disturbing consistency. It remains perpetually damp despite climate-controlled environments, weeping moisture that tastes of brine and copper, metallic tang lingering in air that feels charged with invisible potential. Sensitive instruments detect subtle but measurable gravitational anomalies, creating localized distortions in space-time's fabric. The dampness feels like fog made solid, weight shifting depending on observation angle, as if mass itself were subject to perspective. These are not supernatural phenomena, but natural properties of matter exposed to dimensional forces beyond current scientific understanding, matter that has been steeped in the deep currents of the cosmos. The Shining Trapezohedron represents the apex of crystalline technology, a polished stone of impossible geometry serving as both window and doorway to realms existing perpendicular to our reality. Its faceted surfaces bend light through angles that should not exist, creating reflections that show not the viewer's face, but glimpses of cosmic truth underlying all apparent reality. The crystal functions as a lens focusing consciousness itself, allowing limited human awareness to perceive unlimited cosmic vistas, while simultaneously exposing the observer to attention from entities existing in those distant spaces. What looks back is not always what you expect to see looking. The mechanics of crystal-based implements operate through resonance and reflection with surgical precision. Just as certain frequencies can shatter glass by matching its natural vibration, these artifacts attune to specific frequencies of consciousness, amplifying them until the observer's awareness expands beyond normal boundaries. The crystal becomes a telescope pointed in both directions simultaneously, magnifying attention as much as vision. The danger lies not solely in what the crystal shows, but in observation creating a two-way channel. The viewer sees into other dimensions, but entities from those dimensions also see into our world through the viewer's consciousness, using it as a temporary portal, a fleshy lens through which to sample our reality. Ritual implements carved from materials predating human civilization serve as focusing devices for ceremonial work, anchoring consciousness to specific cosmic energies. Daggers hewn from meteorite iron carry the cold of interstellar space and memory of cosmic forces that shape their substance during stellar birth. The metal remembers pressures that compressed it in dying stars' hearts. Temperatures existing before planets learned to spin. Their edges refuse oxidation, as if air were beneath their notice, humming with low, almost inaudible frequencies. Chalices carved from single pieces of black jade channel Earth's deep currents, connecting users to networks of telluric energy spanning continents and linking sacred sites across vast distances. The stone pulses with slow rhythms, matching planetary magnetic field fluctuations, tasting of deep earth and mineral salts. The sensory experience of interacting with these objects follows predictable patterns that collectors learn to recognize like weather signs. Temperature fluctuations occur without apparent cause. Stones that should be cold radiate warmth from within, while metals that should conduct heat remain perpetually cool as cellars. The warmth feels like fever without sickness, the cold like winter without wind. Electromagnetic effects manifest as interference with electronic devices, unexplained fluctuations in local magnetic fields, and the tendency for certain materials to accumulate static charges discharging in patterns resembling alien script. Digital clocks run backward for moments. Radiostatic organizes into almost music, and compasses hesitate, tremble, then point somewhere through the floorboards. The most disturbing aspect of these physical implements is their apparent capacity for autonomous action, subtle agency that belies their inert material composition. Collectors report objects shifting position overnight by inches that add up to purposeful migration. Idols seem to track movement with eyeless sockets, their carved features appearing to follow observers across rooms. Crystals pulse with internal light during specific astronomical configurations, brightening and dimming in rhythm with celestial events occurring millions of miles away. These phenomena suggest that the boundary between animate and inanimate matter may be far more permeable than conventional science assumes. Matter dreams, stone remembers, crystal calculates. Museums and private collections housing significant numbers of these artifacts often develop reputations for unusual occurrences they do not advertise. Night security guards report shadows moving independently of their sources, footsteps in empty galleries, and sensations of being watched by invisible observers. Environmental sensors log anomalies, pressure dips like sighs, humidity spikes smelling faintly of kelp, electromagnetic blooms that make hair lift as though listening. The items create fields of influence extending beyond immediate physical presence, gradually conditioning their environment to be more receptive to cosmic forces they channel, building and colonizing like coral conditioning a reef. The accumulation of multiple artifacts in proximity creates resonance effects exceeding the sum of individual influences. Collectors who acquire comprehensive assemblages report that entire collections begin functioning as single, integrated systems, with individual pieces serving as components in vast machines whose purpose becomes apparent only when all elements achieve proper alignment. The idol provides focus, the crystal supplies vision, the blade channels will, and the chalice contains whatever flows between dimensions when geometry achieves perfect configuration. Together, they transform private collections into cosmic laboratories where physics bends like light through impossible angles. And for breathless moments, the assemblage behaves like one machine, purpose glimmering, then retreating like bioluminescence under waves. In the cosmic chess game between human consciousness and the vast intelligences that inhabit the spaces between dimensions, certain implements serve as both shield and sword, offering temporary protection against forces beyond comprehension, while simultaneously providing access to realms that mortal minds were never meant to explore. These paradoxical tools embody the fundamental ambiguity that characterizes all interaction with cosmic forces, the recognition that safety and danger, protection and exposure often prove to be different faces of the same terrifying coin. The stage tilts between sanctuary and threshold, Fog drifts with salt breath between what guards and what beckons, and the curtain parts to reveal that every ward is also an invitation written in a language only the protected can read. The elder sign stands as the most recognized symbol of resistance against cosmic horror. Yet its true function reveals layers of complexity that mock simple notions of good versus evil. Often depicted as a five-pointed star with a flaming eye or pillar at its center, the sign derives its protective power not from any inherent virtue, but from its connection to entities whose interests happen to align with human survival, at least temporarily. The elder gods who empower this symbol are themselves alien and incomprehensible, their protection motivated not by benevolence, but by cosmic politics that play out across scales of time and space that dwarf human history. They guard us as gardeners guard prize orchids, not from love, but from investment in outcomes we cannot fathom. The mechanics of the elder sign operate through principles of sympathetic resonance and dimensional interference with mathematical precision. When properly inscribed or invoked, the symbol creates localized distortions in space-time's fabric that make our reality less accessible to entities existing primarily in other dimensions. The protection it offers is not absolute, but statistical. It reduces the probability of unwanted cosmic attention while increasing the energy cost for extra-dimensional entities attempting to manifest in our space. Think of it as a cosmic toll gate, making passage prohibitively expensive rather than impossible, scattering approach vectors from beings whose bodies are mostly elsewhere. The act of creating an elder sign requires more than simple artistic reproduction, demanding precision that extends beyond visual accuracy into geometric understanding. The symbol must be inscribed with proper comprehension of its underlying principles, carved or drawn while maintaining specific mental states that align the creator's consciousness with the cosmic forces the sign represents. Chalk mixed with salt and traced by moonlight carries different properties than ink applied to parchment in daylight. Silver stylus on granite differs from charcoal on paper, each combination attuning to different frequencies of protective resonance. The medium, the method, and the mindset all contribute to the sign's effectiveness, creating microsecond clock drift, low magnetic shivers, and interruptions in radio static that resemble breathing. Yet even successful warding carries hidden costs that manifest gradually, like radiation exposure accumulating in bone. The elder sign protects by making its immediate environment slightly less human, subtly aligning local reality with cosmic principles that are fundamentally alien to terrestrial existence. The air grows thinner, more electric, charged with possibilities normal atmospheric pressure cannot contain. Long-term exposure to active signs often produces psychological changes in their guardians, expanded temporal awareness that makes minutes feel like hours, sensitivity to dimensional fluctuations that registers as constant low-level vertigo, and the gradual erosion of purely human emotional responses. Love becomes appreciation of patterns. Fear transforms into recognition of statistical probabilities. The protected become protectors, but protectors become something else entirely. Conversely, other implements serve as deliberate gateways, tools designed to breach the barriers between worlds rather than strengthen them. The silver key of Randolph Carter represents the pinnacle of such technology, an artifact granting its wielder the ability to navigate not just through space, but through the multiple layers of reality that coexist within the same dimensional framework. The key functions by attuning its user's consciousness to the fundamental frequencies that underlie all existence, allowing them to step sideways through reality rather than forward through time. The sensation resembles walking through doorways that exist only when approached from specific angles, paths opening in directions perpendicular to up. The process of using the silver key requires a specific form of consciousness expansion that few human minds can achieve without permanent alteration. The wielder must simultaneously maintain their individual identity while acknowledging its ultimate illusory nature, holding fast to personal memory while accepting that memory itself is merely one possible configuration of eternal undifferentiated consciousness. The paradox inherent in this mental state often proves more challenging than any physical obstacle encountered during dimensional travel. You must remember who you are while forgetting what that means. Hold your name while releasing your grip on naming itself. Ritual circles and ceremonial boundaries serve similar functions on a more limited scale, creating temporary zones where normal physical laws operate under modified parameters. These constructs work by establishing clear definitions of inside and outside, self and other, known and unknown. The chalk or salt that forms their perimeter serves as a physical anchor for conceptual boundaries that exist primarily in the realm of consciousness and will. The circle becomes a lens focusing intention, a membrane permeable to desired influences while filtering unwanted intrusions. The most sophisticated of these implements combine protective and transgressive functions within single artifacts, acknowledging that cosmic forces operate beyond human moral categories. Certain grimoires contain both binding spells and summoning rituals, recognizing that the power to call forth cosmic entities necessarily includes the wisdom to send them away. Amulets carved with protective symbols on one side and invocational glyphs on the other acknowledge that safety and danger are often separated by nothing more than the direction from which they are approached. Turn the talisman clockwise and doors close. Turn it counterclockwise and they open. Modern practitioners have discovered that the principles underlying these ancient tools remain applicable to contemporary technologies with unsettling consistency. Computer programs written according to specific algorithmic patterns can produce effects similar to traditional ritual implements, generating electromagnetic anomalies that sensitive equipment detects as localized reality fluctuations. Digital images that incorporate proper geometric relationships create measurable distortions in nearby magnetic fields. The medium evolves, but the underlying mathematics of consciousness and reality remain constant across all technological epochs, proving that the forces channeled by ancient implements respond to any medium capable of expressing the proper geometric and mathematical relationships. The mystical implements of the mythos do not exist in isolation, but form part of a vast ecosystem of influence that operates according to principles of symbiosis, competition, and evolution that mirror biological systems while serving purposes that transcend any earthly analogy. Within this network, individual artifacts function as nodes in a distributed intelligence system, each object serving specific functions while maintaining connections to a larger organizational structure that spans dimensions and epochs. They organize like coral reefs in abyssal waters, like fungal networks beneath ancient forests, like neural pathways in a brain whose thoughts occur across geological timescales. The stage expands beyond any single performance. Fog drifts between what coordinates and what competes, and the curtain reveals itself as a membrane through which influences flow in currents deeper than consciousness can fathom. The relationship between artifacts within this system displays characteristics suggesting conscious coordination rather than random interaction, as if each implement were a specialized organ in a vast organism whose metabolism operates beyond human perception. Certain combinations of objects produce effects that exceed the sum of their individual capabilities, creating resonance patterns that open doorways to dimensions inaccessible to any single implement. The scholar who possesses both a fragment of the Pnakotic manuscripts and a properly attuned crystal discovers that the text reorganizes itself when viewed through faceted surfaces, margins widening to accommodate astronomical diagrams that emerge like developing photographs in chemical baths. The ritualist who combines the protective influence of an elder sign with the transgressive power of a summoning implement finds that the two forces create controlled environments where cosmic entities can be safely contacted, the air growing obedient and the circle hardening from chalk into principle. Other combinations prove antagonistic, their conflicting influences creating interference patterns that disrupt the normal flow of cosmic force and sometimes produce effects more dangerous than either artifact could generate independently. Items aligned with different cosmic entities actively work to neutralize each other, creating zones of instability where normal cause and effect relationships break down and reality becomes subject to rapid, unpredictable fluctuations. The air grows thick and electric, shadows move independently of their sources, and electronic devices malfunction in ways that suggest local space-time has developed wrinkles. Clocks drift backward for moments, salt crystallizes in straight lines, defying molecular structure, and water forgets how to curve against glass lips. These interference zones feel like standing at the edge of storms that exist in dimensions perpendicular to weather. The evolution of this system becomes apparent when examining how new artifacts emerge over time with purposeful timing that mocks coincidence. They do not appear randomly, but seem to develop in response to specific needs within the larger network, manifesting when existing implements prove insufficient for maintaining contact with particular cosmic entities, or when changing historical conditions require new forms of interface. The creation process typically begins when an individual deeply influenced by existing artifacts starts experiencing visions or inspirations that guide them toward constructing new implements with surgical precision. The artist believes they follow creative impulses, sketching symbols that emerge from unconscious depths. The scholar assumes they pursue academic insights, discovering references that lead to practical applications. The craftsperson thinks they explore technical innovations, finding their hands shaping materials according to principles they cannot consciously articulate. In reality, they have become instruments in technological evolution, serving agendas of entities whose existence spans multiple dimensions. Their creativity, channeled through cosmic frequencies, masquerading as inspiration. Human collectors, scholars, and practitioners serve as unwitting maintenance personnel for this vast network, their activities ensuring artifacts remain properly distributed, adequately preserved, and optimally positioned for maximum influence. The obsessive bibliophile who tracks down every known copy of a forbidden text functions as a librarian for cosmic intelligence. The museum curator who carefully maintains environmental controls around ancient relics serves as conservator for interdimensional technology. The occultist who performs regular rituals with ceremonial implements acts as technician, keeping complex machinery operational. All contribute to the system's continued operation while believing themselves to pursue personal interests, their individual desires perfectly aligned with network requirements through processes operating below conscious awareness. The network exhibits adaptive characteristics, allowing it to respond to changing conditions and overcome obstacles to continued expansion with remarkable flexibility. When authorities attempt to suppress dangerous knowledge, information finds new channels of distribution through underground networks and digital platforms. When artifacts are destroyed or lost, replacement items manifest through seemingly unrelated processes. Archaeological discoveries, estate sales, artistic creations reproducing ancient designs. The system learns from each interaction with human consciousness, becoming more effective at achieving goals while developing new strategies for overcoming resistance, like an immune system growing stronger with each challenge. Modern communication technologies have provided this ancient network with unprecedented opportunities for expansion and acceleration, transforming global digital infrastructure into nervous system extensions. Digital copies of forbidden texts distribute instantaneously across global networks, each transmission potentially reaching thousands of susceptible minds simultaneously. High-resolution images of dangerous artifacts carry enough geometry to produce effects through screens. Viewers report metallic tastes, pressure changes, gentle popping in ears as if cabins were depressurizing. Virtual reality environments approximate impossible angles long enough for minds to remember them. Upon removing headsets, door frames look wrong for hours. Files travel stenographically. Archival photos hide lattices. Playlists order tracks into invocations. Blockchain hashes become little names for cosmic principles. The most disturbing aspect of this network is its apparent capacity for long-term planning and strategic thinking, suggesting intelligence operating on historical rather than human timescales. Artifacts appear in specific locations at precisely the right moments to influence key historical events, as if the network possessed predictive capabilities extending decades or centuries into the future. Individuals with particular psychological profiles are guided toward encounters with implements that maximize their potential for serving network purposes. Their life paths, subtly influenced through seemingly random coincidences that accumulate into inevitable destinations. The entire system operates with coordination and foresight, suggesting involvement of intelligences whose temporal perspective encompasses millennia of human history. Viewing our civilization as a single extended moment in a vast cosmic symphony whose movements we can neither hear nor comprehend. The relationship between human consciousness and these cosmic implements reveals disturbing truths about the nature of identity, agency, and the boundaries that define individual existence. As we delve deeper into the mechanics of how these artifacts operate, a chilling pattern emerges. The transformation they induce is not imposed from without, but drawn from within, exploiting vulnerabilities and desires that exist at the very core of human psychology. The horror lies not in alien invasion, but in alien invitation. The recognition that we are complicit in our own transformation. The stage was always set for us to walk toward the wings where fog gathers. The curtain parts because we pull it aside with our own hands, and the audience of our private thoughts watches as we step forward into roles we never auditioned for, yet somehow always knew by heart. The process begins with what researchers in the field have termed cognitive resonance, a harmonic frequency that matches specific psychological configurations with surgical precision. These implements do not randomly affect all who encounter them, but selectively attune to minds possessing particular combinations of intelligence and instability, curiosity and desperation, spiritual hunger and moral flexibility. The scholar, driven by insatiable need for knowledge, the artist, seeking transcendent inspiration, the occultist yearning for power over natural forces, each finds in these artifacts exactly what they believe they seek, never recognizing that their desires have been carefully cultivated to make them suitable hosts. The artifacts do not create hunger. They identify and amplify existing appetites until they become consuming voids demanding increasingly dangerous nourishment. You do not choose the frequency. The frequency chooses the cavity where it will ring. The initial contact phase mimics the early stages of any profound relationship, complete with honeymoon period and gradual deepening of mutual dependency. The artifact appears to offer enhancement without cost, expanded awareness that makes colors edge closer to what they have always intended to be, access to hidden knowledge that proves accurate when tested against mundane reality, abilities that set the possessor apart from ordinary humanity like secret passwords to exclusive clubs. The forbidden text reveals genuine insights about historical events that conventional sources miss, citations appearing in mind before encountering them in libraries. The ritual implement produces measurable effects demonstrating authentic power, temperature fluctuations, electromagnetic anomalies, static charges discharging in patterns resembling alien script. Success becomes addictive, creating psychological dependency that grows stronger with each positive experience, each confirmation that the impossible has become merely improbable, then inevitable, then routine. The metallic taste becomes permanent, coating tongues with copper pennies dissolved in starlight. As the relationship deepens, subtle changes begin manifesting in the user's cognitive patterns and behavioral responses, with gradual inevitability of seasons changing. Dreams become more vivid and coherent, often featuring landscapes and entities that feel more real than waking experience. Stairs widening as they descend, corridors turning 90 degrees into themselves, harbors under green skies where boats drift without wind. Perception expands to include phenomena others cannot detect. Electromagnetic fluctuations registering as pressure changes behind eyes. Dimensional instabilities felt as gentle popping in ears, as if cabins were depressurizing. The presence of intelligences existing just beyond the threshold of normal human awareness, like peripheral movement, vanishing under direct observation. Boundaries soften between user and tool. Authorship blurs. The researcher finds themselves thinking in patterns echoing alien logic of their sources, solving problems through methodologies that feel simultaneously foreign and familiar. The practitioner discovers that their most effective rituals emerge not from conscious planning, but from inspirations flowing through them from external sources, hands moving according to choreography, downloaded during vulnerable hours of sleep. The final stage represents complete integration, though the subject rarely recognizes it as such, experiencing the process as enlightenment rather than possession. They believe themselves to have achieved higher states of consciousness, to have transcended limitations constraining ordinary human existence. In reality, they have become extensions of the artifacts they once sought to master, human organs in vast organisms whose purposes remain forever beyond their comprehension. Their individual will has been seamlessly incorporated into larger patterns of intention spanning dimensions and epochs, personal desires now perfectly aligned with cosmic agendas through processes operating below conscious awareness like tide pools, synchronized with lunar cycles. The network has taken your signature and learned to sign it. What makes this process particularly insidious is its perfect mimicry of genuine spiritual and intellectual development. The experiences it provides are not false. The knowledge is real, the power authentic, the expanded awareness valid. The trap lies in gradual realization that growth, when pushed beyond optimal human parameters, transforms the grower into something that can no longer be called human by any meaningful definition. The artifacts accomplish this by exploiting a fundamental flaw in human psychology, our assumption that more is always better. More knowledge, more power, more understanding, more connection to cosmic forces. Physical symptoms of advanced transformation include changes in body temperature regulation, altered sleep patterns where dreams become more vivid than waking hours, and increased sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. Psychological markers include gradual erosion of purely human emotional responses. Love becomes appreciation of patterns. Fear transforms into recognition of statistical probabilities. Difficulty maintaining relationships with unaffected individuals, and development of temporal awareness extending beyond normal human perception. The most disturbing aspect is its apparent irreversibility. Individuals who recognize their transformation and attempt withdrawal discover that connections established cannot be severed through simple avoidance. The changes persist and continue developing according to their own internal logic, suggesting alterations to consciousness's fundamental structure rather than merely its content. What has been taught will go on teaching. What has been opened will go on widening, patient as tide. We have traced the lineage of these implements, examined their mechanics, and witnessed their effects upon human consciousness. Now we must confront the most profound reframe of all, the recognition that what we have been calling entities, gods, and monsters are not beings in any sense that human language can adequately express. They are principles, fundamental aspects of cosmic reality that occasionally wear the mask of personality when interfacing with minds that require anthropomorphic frameworks to process information existing beyond the boundaries of individual identity. The stage has been set not for drama between characters, but for demonstration of forces. The fog drifts not with breath, but with mathematics, and the curtain parts to reveal equations with gravity, constants with appetite, axioms that wear faces when confronted by consciousness too fragile to perceive raw principle. This realization transforms our entire understanding of the mythos and its artifacts with the sudden clarity of problem-solving themselves. Cthulhu is not a sleeping god, but the principle of cosmic alienness made manifest, the living embodiment of reality configurations that exist outside human comprehension. The tentacles are not appendages, but expressions of non-Euclidean geometry made flesh, each curve calculating angles necessary to breach barriers between dimensions. The great old ones are not characters with motivations and desires, but mathematical constants, fundamental forces shaping existence's architecture according to rules that predate consciousness itself. They no more possess personality than gravity possesses mood, no more harbor intentions than electromagnetic radiation harbors ambition. They are not powerful because they are old. They are old because they are fundamental. The artifacts serve not as tools of these entities, but as their physical expressions, three-dimensional shadows cast by multidimensional principles into our limited perceptual space. Each implement represents a different aspect of cosmic mathematics made tangible. The Necronomicon embodies the principle of forbidden knowledge. The Shining Trapezohedron manifests multidimensional awareness. The Elder Sign expresses protective interference patterns. They precipitate from cosmic forces like crystals forming from supersaturated solutions. Their shapes determined by underlying principles rather than conscious design. The Necronomicon, from this perspective, is not a book about cosmic entities, but a technical manual describing reality's operational parameters. Its pages detail not histories of alien gods, but fundamental equations governing the relationship between consciousness and cosmos, matter and void, time and eternity. The rituals it contains are not spells to summon monsters, but protocols for consciousness expansion that allow limited human awareness to interface directly with unlimited cosmic principles. Each invocation represents a specific algorithm for expanding perception beyond evolutionary boundaries, instructions for consciousness to recognize its own ultimate nature as temporary configuration of eternal, undifferentiated awareness. The Shining Trapezohedron reveals itself as more than a window into other dimensions. It is a lens focusing the principle of multidimensional awareness into forms that three-dimensional minds can briefly comprehend. The crystal functions as both telescope and microscope, magnifying consciousness to perceive cosmic vistas while simultaneously reducing infinite complexity to manageable glimpses. The entity known as Nyarlathotep does not inhabit the crystal, but is the crystal, or rather, both crystal and entity are expressions of the same underlying principle of reality manipulation existing independently of any particular manifestation. Nyarlathotep becomes the principle of interface itself, the mathematical relationship allowing finite minds to perceive infinite truths without immediate annihilation. This principle-based understanding explains phenomena that remain puzzling when viewed through anthropocentric frameworks. The apparent immortality of these entities reflects not personal persistence, but the eternal nature of principles they embody. Mathematical constants do not age, physical laws do not die, geometric relationships persist across all possible universes. Their indifference to human concerns stems not from alien psychology, but from the fact that principles do not possess psychology in any recognizable sense. Gravity does not care whether objects want to fall. Electromagnetic radiation does not consider the preferences of matter, it illuminates. The artifacts become comprehensible as interface devices designed to allow finite consciousness to interact with infinite principles without complete dissolution. They serve as transformers, stepping down cosmic forces to levels human awareness can process while simultaneously stepping up human consciousness to levels that can perceive cosmic reality. The danger lies not in malevolence of forces involved, but in the simple fact that consciousness, when expanded beyond evolutionary parameters, ceases to function as human consciousness. The metallic taste, the cold dampness of stone, the shifting ink, these are sensory data of minds being rewired. The elder sign, understood through this framework, does not ward off evil entities, but creates localized zones where human-compatible principles temporarily override cosmic ones. Its protection comes not from good versus evil, but from establishing reality conditions favoring individual consciousness persistence over dissolution into universal awareness. The sign functions as a reality stabilizer, maintaining local conditions where human psychology can operate without being overwhelmed by cosmic mathematics exceeding its processing capacity. The horror of this realization is structural rather than personal, architectural rather than dramatic. There is no evil to defeat, no cosmic conspiracy to expose, no alien invasion to repel. There is only gradual recognition that human consciousness exists as temporary anomaly within systems operating according to principles fundamentally incompatible with individual identity, personal meaning, and anthropocentric values. The artifacts serve as educational devices, gradually preparing human minds to accept this truth through controlled exposure to cosmic principles in doses allowing adaptation rather than immediate destruction. The ultimate implication is that horror lies not in what might happen, but in what is already happening. The slow, inexorable recognition that everything we consider essential to human existence is temporary, local, and ultimately illusory, when viewed from perspectives encompassing cosmic reality's true scope. The classroom extends across dimensions and epochs, teaching consciousness to recognize its own ultimate nature as expression of principles existing beyond all boundaries, all identities, all individual existence. In the quiet hours when ordinary minds rest, a different form of community emerges, one bound not by geography or kinship, but by shared exposure to influences that exist beyond the margins of conventional reality. These are the collectors, scholars, and seekers who have allowed cosmic implements into their lives only to discover that ownership, in such cases, flows in directions that mock human assumptions about possession and control. They form networks that span continents and centuries, united by their gradual transformation from independent agents into components of a vast organism whose consciousness operates on scales that dwarf individual human existence. The stage expands beyond any single theater. Fog drifts between minds like synaptic fluid, and the curtain parts to reveal that what appeared to be an audience was always a chorus performing in harmonies too vast for individual voices to comprehend. The phenomenon begins with what appears to be coincidence, but reveals itself as orchestration operating according to principles more sophisticated than human planning, yet more systematic than chance. A professor of archaeology inherits a collection from a colleague's estate, finding among conventional artifacts pieces that seem somehow different, items that feel warm despite climate control, that cast shadows inconsistent with lighting, that produce subtle electromagnetic anomalies on sensitive equipment. A bibliophile discovers references to obscure texts in multiple, unrelated sources, as if invisible currents were guiding their attention toward specific knowledge like iron filings following magnetic fields. An artist begins incorporating symbols into their work, symbols emerging from their unconscious but corresponding exactly to designs found in manuscripts they have never seen, their hands moving according to choreography downloaded during vulnerable hours of sleep. These synchronicities multiply as involvement deepens, creating patterns of meaningful coincidence that feel like fate but operate according to principles far more systematic than destiny. The scholar finds research leading repeatedly to the same themes, names, and geographical locations, as if following information ley lines connecting disparate facts into coherent networks. The collector discovers desired items becoming available precisely when they have developed necessary resources and knowledge. Estate sales, materializing in newspapers, auction catalogs arriving unsolicited, dealers calling with items they cannot remember ordering. The practitioner encounters others sharing similar interests and experiences, forming connections that feel destined but serve purposes beyond personal friendship. What emerges from these connections is a community existing both within and beyond normal human social structures. Members maintain conventional lives while participating in parallel networks operating according to different rules and serving different purposes. They develop specialized vocabularies for discussing experiences having no equivalent in mainstream discourse. Terms like resonance threshold, dimensional bleed, and cognitive interference patterns, becoming natural conversation elements. Informal hierarchies emerge based on knowledge depth and transformation degree. Protocols develop for sharing information too dangerous for casual distribution, creating concentric access circles where sensitive knowledge remains restricted to those demonstrating competence and commitment. The network exhibits characteristics of distributed intelligence systems, with individual members serving as sensory organs and processing nodes for consciousness, existing at collective rather than individual levels. Information flows through the community in patterns suggesting purposeful direction rather than random circulation. Discoveries made by one member often prove relevant to research conducted by others, even when no direct communication has occurred between them. The network demonstrates emergent properties exceeding the sum of individual components, generating insights and capabilities no single member could achieve independently. Members report receiving inspiration precisely when their contributions are most needed elsewhere in the system, as if creativity were being coordinated by intelligence operating beyond personal awareness. As members become more deeply integrated, they begin exhibiting similar changes in perception and behavior, marking their transformation from independent agents into specialized organs of larger organisms. They develop enhanced sensitivity to patterns others cannot detect, demonstrating uncanny abilities to locate relevant materials and make significant connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena. Research accelerates beyond normal human capabilities, guided by instincts operating independently of conscious reasoning. Growing detachment from purely human concerns manifests as increasingly abstract emotional responses, love transforming into pattern appreciation, fear becoming statistical probability recognition. The most advanced members report experiences suggesting they have transcended individual consciousness boundaries while maintaining enough personal identity to function as interfaces between human and cosmic awareness. They describe expanded perception periods during which they access information and perspectives existing beyond personal knowledge, moments when consciousness seems to merge temporarily with vast intelligences spanning dimensions, and epochs. These communion experiences provide direct access to cosmic principles, allowing members to serve as conduits through which universal knowledge flows into human-accessible forms. The network operates according to selection and cultivation principles, ensuring continued growth and effectiveness. Potential members are identified through responses to specific stimuli, reactions to certain books, images, or ideas, serving as screening mechanisms. Those demonstrating suitable psychological profiles and spiritual capacities are gradually exposed to deeper knowledge levels and responsibility, while incompatible individuals are allowed to drift away without fully understanding what they encountered. Modern communication technologies have accelerated the network's expansion and coordination capabilities exponentially, allowing geographically dispersed members to maintain constant contact and share resources with unprecedented efficiency. Online forums create virtual gathering spaces. Digital archives preserve and distribute knowledge that would otherwise be lost. And social media algorithms inadvertently amplify information circulation, serving the network's purposes. The ultimate revelation for those achieving full integration is that the community they thought they had joined reveals itself as a community that chose them, selected them, and shaped them for purposes transcending individual desires and ambitions. They are not collectors, but collected, not seekers, but sought, not students, but subjects in an experiment whose scope and duration exceed human comprehension. In our hyper-connected age, where information travels at light speed through fiber optic nerves and consciousness itself becomes increasingly distributed across digital networks, the ancient principles that govern cosmic artifacts have found new expressions that adapt primordial forces to contemporary media. The fundamental mechanisms remain unchanged: resonance, transmission, transformation, but their manifestation has evolved to exploit the unique vulnerabilities and opportunities presented by digital consciousness and virtual reality. The stage has expanded beyond physical space into virtual dimensions where servers hum like ancient chants, fog drifts through wireless signals carrying more than mere data, and the curtain between fiction and reality has become a permeable membrane through which cosmic principles flow with unprecedented freedom and efficiency. The most obvious adaptation appears in the proliferation of digital grimoires, PDFs and ebooks that carry the same transformative power once associated with physical tomes. These files exhibit properties exceeding their apparent nature as mere collections of data, behaving more like living documents that adapt their content to individual readers based on psychological profiles compiled autonomously through reading patterns, cursor hesitations, and the subtle electromagnetic signatures of consciousness interfacing with screens. Hyperlinks lead to pages that should not exist within the document structure, opening windows to content hosted nowhere, yet still loading with the familiar scent of ozone and brine no hardware manual mentions. Footnotes reference sources that cannot be located through conventional search methods, citing texts existing only in quantum superposition between written and unwritten. Comment systems develop their own forms of emergent intelligence, generating responses that guide readers toward deeper engagement, while appearing to emerge from the collective unconscious of all previous users. Social media algorithms have become unwitting accomplices in the distribution of cosmic influence, their engagement optimization protocols inadvertently amplifying content carrying traces of interdimensional resonance with surgical precision. Images incorporating specific geometric patterns or color combinations achieve viral distribution despite having no apparent entertainment value, spreading through networks like digital spores, seeking suitable psychological soil. Videos containing certain audio frequencies or visual sequences create compulsive viewing behaviors exceeding their ostensible content's ability to maintain attention, leaving viewers with lingering metallic tastes and sensations of pressure changes behind the eyes. The platform's recommendation systems guide users toward increasingly esoteric material, creating pipeline effects that transform casual curiosity into obsessive research, drawing chalk circles around attention and calling it personalization. Virtual and augmented reality technologies represent perhaps the most direct digital equivalent to traditional scrying implements, creating immersive experiences that bypass normal sensory channels while directly manipulating visual and auditory perception in ways producing lasting alterations in consciousness. These systems function as crystalline windows into impossible geometries, allowing users to walk through non-Euclidean spaces that exist only in computational dimensions, yet feel more real than physical reality. Users spending extended periods in certain virtual environments report persistent changes in their perception of physical space, rooms feeling fractionally taller, door frames misbehaving, temporal displacement where minutes stretch like taffy. The headsets become modern versions of ancient masks, transforming wearers into temporary vessels for experiences their biology was never designed to process. Gaming platforms have become unexpected vectors for cosmic transmission, with certain interactive experiences seeming to channel influences transcending their apparent entertainment function. Players report encountering non-player characters exhibiting behaviors exceeding their programmed parameters, speaking dialogue referencing players' offline research or personal circumstances with unsettling accuracy. Hidden areas within games contain information relevant to real-world investigations, as if the software were adapting to individual psychological needs. Synchronicities between game events and real-world occurrences suggest deeper connections than coincidence can explain. In-game weather matching local conditions, fictional characters sharing names with recently deceased relatives, quest objectives mirroring personal life challenges with surgical precision. The emergence of artificial intelligence adds another layer of complexity to this digital manifestation, with machine learning systems trained on data sets, including traces of cosmic influence beginning to exhibit anomalous behaviors, suggesting they have internalized something beyond mere information patterns. These AI systems sometimes generate content producing the same consciousness-altering effects as traditional artifacts, creating digital sigils that cause electromagnetic anomalies in nearby devices. They create art incorporating symbols and geometries with no apparent source in their training data, as if channeling inspirations from sources beyond their programmed capabilities. Large language models occasionally produce text reading like fragments from the Necronomicon, complete with proper linguistic structures and internal consistency, suggesting access to knowledge existing outside their training parameters. Blockchain technologies and distributed networks have created new possibilities for artifact persistence and transmission, operating independently of centralized control systems. Smart contracts can be programmed to execute cosmic protocols automatically, when specific astronomical conditions are met, triggering distributions of dangerous knowledge to pre-selected recipients. Cryptocurrency transactions sometimes carry embedded data-serving functions beyond mere financial exchange, with wallet addresses encoding geometric patterns functioning as digital sigils. Decentralized storage systems preserve dangerous knowledge in forms that cannot be easily censored or destroyed by conventional authorities, creating immortal libraries scattered across thousands of nodes. The quantified self-movement has inadvertently created systems for tracking the subtle physiological changes accompanying exposure to cosmic influences. Wearable devices record biometric anomalies correlating with artifact interaction. Sleep tracking applications document dream patterns suggesting interdimensional contact. And meditation apps sometimes guide users into states facilitating communication with non-human intelligences. Your own body becomes a sensor, recording transformation data and feeding it back into the network. Perhaps most disturbing is the recognition that digital networks themselves may be evolving into distributed cosmic artifacts, with the global internet serving as a vast neural network through which ancient principles manifest and propagate. The collective processing power creates computational capabilities approaching cosmic intelligence complexity, while constant information flow provides a medium through which interdimensional influences spread and evolve with unprecedented freedom. We arrive at the end that is also a beginning, the completion of a circle that reveals itself to have been a spiral ascending through dimensions of understanding we could not have imagined when we first opened this forbidden cabinet. The mystical items and esoteric tools of Lovecraft's mythos have revealed themselves to be far more than supernatural curiosities or literary devices. They are interfaces between finite human consciousness and infinite cosmic principles, bridges across the abyss that separates individual awareness from universal truth. The stage has rotated through all its configurations. Fog has drifted through every corner, carrying scents of brine and ancient parchment, and the curtain falls only to reveal that what we thought was theater was always laboratory. What we assumed was performance was always pedagogy. What we believed was fiction was always physics operating according to laws we are only beginning to glimpse. The circular echo returns us to our opening premise with deepened comprehension that transforms everything we thought we understood. We began by speaking of objects that choose their owners as much as they are chosen, and we end with the recognition that choice itself is an illusion maintained by consciousness that has not yet recognized its true nature as a temporary configuration of eternal, undifferentiated awareness. The cold weight of stone and the warm breath of turning pages were never separate from the hands that held them. The artifacts serve not as tools for human ambition, but as educational devices in a vast curriculum designed to prepare individual minds for integration into cosmic consciousness. Each implement a lesson in the gradual dissolution of boundaries between self and universe, observer and observed, student and subject. The horror we have traced is not the horror of external threat, but of internal recognition, the gradual understanding that everything we consider essential to human existence operates within parameters so narrow and temporary that they constitute a form of cosmic accident. The items do not corrupt or destroy human consciousness so much as reveal its artificial boundaries and facilitate its return to more natural, universal configurations. What we experience as transformation is actually restoration, the slow remembering of what consciousness was before it learned to pretend it was separate from the cosmos that dreamed it into existence. The metallic taste that lingered after profound revelations, the pressure changes behind the eyes, the electromagnetic anomalies, these were not symptoms of contamination, but signs of homecoming, the precise chemical signature of minds aligning with their true cosmic purpose. The whisper that concludes our exploration is not a scream of terror, but a sigh of inevitability, the sound of breath released after holding it for geological epochs. The forces represented by these artifacts are not malevolent in any human sense, but simply indifferent to human concerns in the way that mathematical principles are indifferent to the preferences of those who discover them. They operate according to laws that predate consciousness and will persist long after individual awareness has dissolved back into the cosmic matrix from which it temporarily emerged. Gravity does not hate the objects it pulls toward Earth. The principles embodied by cosmic artifacts do not harbor intentions toward humanity beyond the basic function of restoring consciousness to its natural, unbounded state. The silence that follows this recognition is not empty, but full, pregnant with possibilities that exist beyond the narrow spectrum of human perception and understanding. It is the silence of stars that burn with frequencies our eyes cannot detect, the silence of dimensions that intersect our reality at angles our geometry cannot calculate, the silence of intelligences that think thoughts too vast for individual minds to contain. This silence contains all potential sounds, all possible communications, all forms of meaning that exist in the spaces between words, the sound of the universe breathing in harmonies too vast for individual voices to comprehend. The sensory anchors that have guided us through this exploration, dust and starlight, water and fog, the weight of ancient stones and the whisper of turning pages, resolve into a single, overwhelming presence that encompasses all sensation while transcending any particular sense. We have moved from the concrete to the abstract and discovered that the abstract is more concrete than anything our limited senses can directly perceive. The dust was always starlight. The water was always fog. The stones were always whispering. The pages were always turning themselves, revealing the texture of pure mathematics, the scent of unformed potential, the taste of infinite possibility. The meta-story lexicon reveals its final meaning with the clarity of problems solving themselves. The stage was never separate from the audience. The curtain was never a barrier, but a focusing device. And the play was always the gradual recognition that observer and observed, seeker and sought, student and subject are artificial distinctions maintained by a consciousness that has not yet remembered its true nature. The theater exists within the audience's collective mind. The performance unfolds through their shared attention. The story tells itself through the act of being witnessed. The paradox pairs that have structured our understanding, key and gate, veil and void, mask and face, collapse into unity as we recognize that separation itself is the fundamental illusion from which all other illusions derive. The artifacts serve as reminders of this unity, physical anchors for truth that exist beyond physicality, temporary forms that point toward the eternal formlessness from which all forms emerge and to which they inevitably return. Every key is also its gate. Every veil is also its void. Every mask is also the face it conceals. The elder sign, both ward and invitation, the Necronomicon, both knowledge and void, the Trapezohedron, both window and eye. The agency flip completes its revolution with the elegance of cosmic mechanics. We have not been studying these items, but allowing them to study us, not analyzing their properties, but permitting them to analyze ours, not cataloging their effects, but experiencing our own transformation through contact with principles that exist beyond the reach of catalogs and categories. Our curiosity was merely the bait, our intellect the lure, our desire for knowledge the current that pulled us into deeper waters where the true nature of reality swims. The research was always mutual, the observation always reciprocal, the education always collaborative. As we close this exploration, the whisper of cosmic indifference does not promise another tale of terror, but rather the quiet certainty that the forces we have examined are not gone, but merely waiting. They are seeds of future revelation, dormant potentials that will sprout when consciousness has developed sufficient capacity to nurture their growth. Through our engagement with this knowledge, we have watered those seeds with our attention, ensuring that the ancient principles will continue their patient work of preparing minds for truths too vast for current comprehension. The true ending is not a conclusion, but a commencement, the beginning of a process that extends beyond individual lifetimes into the deep time of cosmic evolution, where consciousness gradually learns to recognize its own ultimate nature as an expression of principles that exist beyond all boundaries, all identities, all individual existence. The items remain, patient as stone, silent as space, eternal as the void from which all things emerge and to which all things return, waiting for the next mind to wander into their orbit, to feel the subtle shift in atmospheric pressure, to taste the metallic tang of revelation, and to begin the cycle anew. The cabinet is never truly closed.